Oh, May 3rd, we were talking about Florida. Smarter lucky, how Florida dodged the worst of the coronavirus. Even in early May of 2020, we knew that Florida had chosen the correct path. And this was even with Florida still doing most of the lockdown. And again, DeSantis has been very clear about this. He has said repeatedly that at first he went along with the program, right? The lockdown off pandemic playbook program. But what DeSantis did, and it was obvious what he was doing here, is that he was also looking at things like Sweden. He was also looking at places like Iceland. He was paying attention to the schools. He was paying attention to the fact that there was a discussion among really revered and high-end scientists, doctors, academics, policymakers, et cetera, that did not agree with the approved narrative of lockdown. And DeSantis, at this point, was not very vocal about it, right? Because the cancel machine is a thing, right? And back here, it was a thing with an A. I mean, if you came out, you were doomed. We saw that a few days ago with Dr. Katz on Bill Maher. I mean, guy's life was completely crushed by daring to speak off narrative. But here we have Florida, and thank goodness that we have Florida in these United States, and thank goodness that we are a republic. It is monumentally depressing that so many of my fellow citizens here in the United States do not appreciate or even understand the structure of our great country. Is our country perfect? Of course not, right? But this was founded to be a federation of states that are really pretty autonomous. They're not as autonomous as the countries in the European Union, for instance, but they're very autonomous, right? And the idea was that the federal government had a short list of things that it was supposed to do, and everything else, per the Constitution, is left to the states, right? The founders called this the laboratory of democracy. The idea here was if you allowed free movement of a free citizenry between these states, that what you would have is, whether it was a pandemic strategy or some sort of schools thing or way they structure their tax base or whatever, each state had the freedom, the autonomy to try different things, to try different systems, to try different solutions to perhaps the same problems. And what would happen, and what always does happen, is you have state A trying something, state B trying something else, and then you kind of see an answer at a certain point on most things. And you have the proportioning of House seats via the census, which is also in the Constitution. And when populations move from state A, who screwed up issue X, and they move to state B because state B did well on issue X, you have a very painful reduction of power of that first state. So there are built-in structural incentives to, frankly, make the correct decision. There also are other mechanisms, pressure mechanisms on states. Unfortunately, for this pandemic, a lot of those other natural mechanisms have been muted and they have not been allowed to work. A lot of the economic incentives have been muted because businesses, people going out of business, people losing their jobs, normally those things would be very, very strong impetus to get things back to normal, to focus in on what really are the helpful and correct strategies and techniques for handling this thing. Because we showered so much money on, unemployment and, the PPP loans and all this stuff, we have disallowed those natural market mechanisms from helping us reach the correct decisions here. This is keeping the natural laboratory of democracy, which is our state republic system here, from working correctly. All right. That said, even at this point, May 3rd, 2020, Florida was obviously, visibly making the right choice. And a lot of us chose to see it, and the rest of us, and you know who you are, blame Trump somehow for this. Great. Good going. Also, on May 3rd, I made a little thingy. Extinction! Yeah, I made that, and it's irritating. A little shareable meme I made to try and wake people up. Personally, I had been trying to use studies and links and articles and opinions and interviews and data and science and evidence to change hearts and minds. If you remember back to a year ago, there was no change in any hearts and minds, right? People were freaked out. They liked being freaked out. The media was telling them, A, to freak out, and B, that it was right to freak out. And so those of us on Team Reality that were desperately trying to stop the madness, stop the encroaching, the encroaching tyranny, frankly, that was happening, we were not having a lot of good luck with normal conversations, unfortunately. And so I made this little shareable to try and honestly give people a little bit of a virtual slap across the face. At this point, we had been inside for a long time, a month, going on, 5-6 weeks at this point. And we were starting to be unhealthy. We were starting to get fat. Some of us were starting to talk about those negative repercussions of our boneheaded lockdown decision. And I wasn't really trying to start like a hashtag campaign or anything, but I like this "if we stay inside, we die." It's a little bit of a run on. And then I used, obviously, Ed Norton from Fight Club sitting here, again, that malaise. And, of course, Charles Thompson on vocals.